Yo, what's happening, y'all? This is B Jizzle of the Pull Up Basketball Podcast. Welcome to the #1 LA Clipper podcast out there. We want to first give you guys a shout out, LA Clipper fan, LA Clipper Nations, for being here. Before we get started, make sure you guys, if you guys have not already, hit that like button, hit the share, hit the subscribe, and as well, if you guys have not already, share this podcast with your family and friends. They will not be disappointed, but let's get it popping. On a daily and game basis. You guys do not want to miss out on that. But that doesn't stop there. We also have 2 game live actions. You guys get the ability to watch some of these great players warm up before the game starts. You know what I mean? You guys do not want to miss how these players can really dominate on the court on a game and game in and out basis. Do not miss that opportunity. And then we also have in-game live action shots and coverage such as the intros. And you guys get the ability to watch some of the players up close, be able to see what it's like to be courtside and what the fan interactions are like, the passion, the shots made, the crossovers, the defense, everything, all in one. You guys will enjoy.
Freeze. That's cold.
What's good, everybody? Welcome to the Pull-Up Show. I'm your host, Mr. BJ Matthews, aka B Jizzle. Before we get started, follow us on the YouTube page, the Pull-Up Basketball Podcast. Like, share, subscribe. All of our YouTube videos. Hit that like button. Y'all come in here. Hit that share, to subscribe. Hit that Cash App, $ BJ Matthews, $ BJ Matthews for all this great content that we drop on a daily, monthly, yearly baseless. You know what I'm saying? Make sure you guys support by hitting that Cash App, as well as also get your membership badges that are available. 3 options: the pull-up badge, the LA Clipper badge, and the interview badge that we just brought up for the spring and the summer season. But that's nonetheless, let's get it popping. All right, y'all. So we back with the weekly videos again. We are the second part of the season. NBA All-Star break is over. If you guys have not already checked out our last video, we talked about the NBA All-Star weekend. It was a great video that we just dropped. So make sure you guys, if you have not got a chance, to go and check out that video that we had with me and Rick yesterday on our live. We'd be able to have a good, talk with, the audience and things of that nature. How did y'all feel about the All-Star weekend? Did y'all feel like it was a disappointment? Did y'all feel like it was neutral? Or did y'all actually like the All-Star game event? Let make sure y'all go check out that video from yesterday. But let's get it popping. I made another video, graveyard shift. You know what I'm saying? This is midnight over here in the West Coast. So we are back at it, you know what I'm saying, working hard for y'all. But we got definitely a topic for y'all, you know what I'm saying, right now, surrounding the Clippers. LA Clipper talk, we're back at it. We play up against the Oklahoma City Thunder on Thursday, our first game back after the All-Star break. So we're definitely gonna get the second part of the season ready to go. So I think this was a topic that was worth talking about, since we are getting ready for the playoffs in a matter of less than 2 months exactly. So when you talk about the Clippers and you talk about certain teams, there's always going to be certain questions and certain things that people have when you talk about winning the championship. At this point, in my personal humble opinion, in the Western Conference, the two best teams, as far as not just their record, but just them as in general, they're going to have the most success in the playoffs, in my opinion, are the LA Clippers and the Denver Nuggets. Those are the two teams in the West that you have to look at to beat. They're the most deepest, in my opinion. I think they're the most well constructed. I think they have both coaches who are championship oriented, and I think that they have the best players on each team. The two best players on each team are the two best in the Western Conference. I'm talking about Nikola Jokic and Kawhi Leonard. I think those are the two best players in the Western Conference. So when you talk about that conference, I think these are the two teams that you have to look at to beat. Now, of course, you got the Phoenix Suns, who are right there as well. You got other teams like Dallas Mavericks. You got the Minnesota Timberwolves, who's been playing great. OKC Thunder has been playing great. You know what I'm saying? You got the New Orleans Pelicans. You got the Dallas Mavericks. You got the Utah Jazz, the Lakers, who are going to try to make a run in the second part of the season. Golden State Warriors are going to try to make another run. There's so much competition in the Western Conference. Sacramento Kings, that you got to really look it through up and down. Who's gonna come out on top? So I think it's a very exciting time. But of course, we're talking about the Clippers. So when people talk about the Clippers and they say how do they compare and how do they contrast, to everybody else, and what is something that possibly can keep from a championship, the main part that people are worried about is the injuries. And when I say the injuries, I'm talking about the injuries to our star players, Kawhi Leonard and Paul George. So when you look at Kawhi Leonard and Paul George, they are the two best players on our team. And over the last three out of 4 seasons, one or both have been out with injuries. Kawhi, of course, was out with injury after that torn ACL in 2021 playoffs. He missed the 21 and 22 season. Paul George later on in the 2022 season got hurt. He tore his UCL in his shoulder, in his arm. And then the following year, 2023, they basically had Kawhi Leonard, who was out for the pretty much the entire year. And no, I'm sorry, last year, 22-23, Kawhi Leonard got hurt in the playoffs, and PG got hurt where he didn't even get a chance to be in the playoffs. So, 3 out of the last 4 years, either one or both these guys have been hurt. So a lot of people are kind of, taking a step back about crowning them as the, possible Western Conference champions. As y'all come in here, smash that like button. We have a great show. This is a pre-recorded video. There is certain concerns around this team when it talks about injuries, but now that we have both our stars that's been healthy for the majority of the season, I think that's starting to wear off a little bit, and people are becoming less and less concerned because they can see that their best players can actually play a full season and still be able to go for the playoffs. Now, of course, we have to remain to be seen, but I think a lot of people are choosing to ease back on that sentiment that the Clippers cannot be healthy for the playoffs as far as their main stars. So now, the new concern is there's two certain players that are on the top of the list when talk about people what could keep the Clippers from winning the championship? And when I say that, I'm talking about Paul George, who I just mentioned, who's our co-star, who's our second best player on our team. You got certain people are concerned about him and his personal performances, and could he be a reason why the Clippers don't win the championship? But also our newest, most acquired star in James Harden, who was just acquired earlier this season after 5 games. He's another player that people are concerned about as far as keeping the Clippers from winning the championship. Now, when you speak on this subject, this is a subject that's been very, very talked about. This is nothing, nothing that hasn't been talked about by the masses. This isn't something that people kind of just have no idea what it is. But this is the first time we really discussed it in totality. We're going to discuss in totality about these two guys because I think it's time that we do it. So the story of this show is going to be can you trust Paul George and James Harden in the postseason, in the playoffs? That's the name of this live. Can you trust James Harden and Paul George in the playoffs? Now, the reason why we ask that question is because for the duration of both of their careers, they have been labeled as two guys who, have been a little bit shaky when they talk about trusting a player in the postseason. Paul George, as of recent time, has looked at as somebody, let's just call a spade a spade. People think that he's mentally weak. Ever since the bubble happened in 2020, people have got on Paul George and said that he was mentally weak. After he came out and said that he dealt with, some depression into the bubble. Y'all know the bubble was a very trying time about 4 years ago where people were doing coronavirus. And, that was a time not just with sports and athletics, but life. It was pretty tough. You talk about people going to, local stores looking to, buy essentials and things like that. They couldn't, get everything because we were in a time where, things were running out and, people were actually, in some desperation at times. So it was very, very trying at that time 4 years ago. But in the NBA, they played in the NBA bubble where they were consumed in basically one vicinity to play the basketball tournament, play the playoffs because they originally canceled it after the whole, pandemic. They decided to play and move it to like an actual venue in Orlando. Now, there were certain players such as PG who dealt with, depression in the bubble. And then you had, players who actually felt like they were, good playing in the bubble. You had a lot of high performances, 50-point games, for Donovan Mitchell, Jamal Murray. There was a lot of, historic, games in that, that series, in that playoff run. But certain guys didn't take well to that, and Paul George is one of them. Now, I want to go deep a little bit into this subject because I think it's a little bit misconstrued. I think a lot of people are overlooking certain aspects about these two players about when they talk about their playoff struggles, quote unquote. So PG has been in the league for I believe 12 years, and James Harden's been in the league for I think 14 years. Right. So these are some of the top players that's been over with the last decade. So when you compare and contrast and you actually, put the things in the numbers, the experiences that they've had in the playoffs and the postseason, you got to look at everything as a whole. Now, PG and James Harden, of course, have heard, the rumblings about them, being playoff chokers and this, that, and the other. And they have spoken out about it. More so Paul George. I want to play a little bit of a clip on what he felt like, when people, speak about him and his name, talking about he's a playoff choke, he's not a playoff performance, this, that, and the other. I want y'all to kind of hear what he had to say on this little short clip interview. It's like about a minute and 10 seconds. So I want you guys to actually hear what PG had to say in this interview. All right, we'll be right back.
What is the one noise or one narrative that you've heard that you've taken the most personally, that you feel is the most incorrect?
I would say probably just that I'm not a playoff performer. Again, I had one experience again that was documented during the bubble that I didn't play my best. I struggled. And that kind of, has floated with me. And there's been other playoff moments where I was playing through injuries that I think people was like, oh, he's not this. Well, you didn't know where I was dealing with at that time. But I think, more than anything, that's when basketball is most important. And when you spoke about the legacy and touched on that, I think that's where legacy is made. And so that's just the most important questions that will be answered for me.
All right, so as y'all come in here, make sure y'all smash that like button. But that was PG speaking about his playoff, criticism from fans and certain media pundits and things of that nature. Um, Taylor Rooks, who was interviewing, who I love, Taylor Rooks, she does a great job of actually interviewing these NBA players. She's an NBA, reporter, very well respected, and I, think she did a great job conducting that interview. This was done actually earlier this season, where the Clippers were in Hawaii for the preseason. So, PG did a, interview with Taylor Rooks the last day of them actually being in Hawaii, and the question that you guys just, the response I heard from PG about, Taylor Hooks asking that question, what is the one thing that you think people will get misunderstood about you? And he automatically said it was just his playoff performances. He's not a playoff performer. Now, I'm going to go into some actual aspects of, both of these guys, PG and James Harden, because I think it's, appropriate that we actually put there on the screen what we have to support by basically our opinions. So I want to actually put up the numbers that PG has averaged and, his statistics and things of that nature in the playoffs. Now, if we look into a nutshell, PG, his playoff career, he's 51 and 57, I think, out of 108 games, right? I think he's played 108 games in his career. He is 51 and 57. So, of course, that's, 6 games below 500. But when you really look at his career, you kind of see why the record that he has on the screen is a little bit, lopsided. But, if you look at his numbers right here, um, going all the way back to when he was in Indiana, um, you could see the numbers he had produced as far as his points per game, his rebounds, assists, his steals, his shooting splits, things of that nature. You guys can kind of see in a nutshell what PG was working with for his entire career. Let me move this out the way so y'all can see more clear. But I'm saying this to basically put out the point, let's get everything on the table about what's going on and how do we feel about PG's performances as, a playoff performer. Like I said, he took offense saying that he's not a playoff performer, doesn't go out there and perform in the playoffs, right? So these are some of his numbers. After the 2011-2012 season, which was the second year, he automatically jumped from 9.7 to 19.2 points per game. He jumped up in rebounds, he jumped up in assists, and I think he went back in steals for a year. But the third year he was in the league, he took the Indiana Pacers to the conference finals against the Miami Heat, and he won the most improved player of the year that year. And all his stats just jumped up, and they continuously jumped up, from the third to the fourth to the fourth to the fifth to the fifth to the sixth season, as far as the points production and the rebounds and the assists. Right, his production jumped off in every category possible. So that is a testimony to basically that he was getting better single year. Now, of course, in between that, he did go through that, leg injury, which needs to be documented. After he went through the leg injury, I think there's something that took off with, PG, that he was not the same as far as, him attacking the rim. I think he not so much lost his athleticism as the fact that he lost a little bit more of his aggression, his just basically going into um, every player with, full force. Now he's a little bit more calculative, and he's kind of been like that since the OKC days about, choosing the spots and, choosing when to, go inside and things of that nature. But in Indiana, he kind of just had no memory because he never really went to no injuries. But still a great player. As a matter of fact, I think he got better as he got older. He got more polished. He got more under control. He got more better with his shooting. He got more better with his offensive game. I just think the younger PG before the injury was just more about, instinct. But back to the point, with his playoff performances, as y'all can see, he's never had after his second year, he never averaged less than 20 points per game. Right. Now, of course, his years in Indiana, he was more of the first option. OKC, he was semi the first option with Russell Westbrook. And then, of course, with the Clippers, he's the second option with Kawhi. Right. So really the Pacer years was really his only time he was the clear cut number one. And as y'all can see, he averaged, pretty good efficiency numbers. He got rebounds, he had assists, he pretty much did everything, got steals, like 2 steals per game, 2.0 steals per game, 2.2. That was when he was the elite two-way player. Now, I want to bring something up to bring this up. We already named his playoff record, which you guys can see on the screen is 51 and 57. That's his playoff record. Then he played, this is his averages. He's averaged 21 points per game, 7.5 rebounds, and 4 assists in 108 games in his playoff career. Like I said, 2 of those seasons he came off basically as a role player, playing behind Danny Granger and kind of being the young pup on the team. So that does factor into his his averages, right? So looking into a nutshell, I think there were years that PG took over as the number one option where he had like high efficiency games, and there were times and when he wasn't the first option, he was more the second option, right? So it's kind of tough to get like 27, 28 from a career. You're talking about numbers that you're looking at are kind of monumental, right? So I kind of want to put that to point out to say this, but something else that PG mentioned in that interview is that he was dealing with injuries both years in OKC. Now the reason I put that up is because the 2 years that really kind of haunts PG is the bubble, which we're going to bring up very quickly, and the 2018 playoffs against the Utah Jazz. Now, I went into actually looking in detail what happened in that series against the Utah Jazz, and this is what I found. So if you look at every single game, it went 6 games. This was PG's first year with the the OKC Thunder. They were looked at to possibly be a powerhouse team in the Western Conference. I remember that year with Golden State Warriors being there as well. The OKC Thunder was a team that was looking at to be like a contender in the playoffs, right? They had replaced Paul George and Kevin Durant, so they looked at a team that possibly can make some noise in the postseason. But there is the notion that PG doesn't perform in the playoffs, but as y'all can see right here in the statistics, the points, rebounds, assists, steals, blocks, turnovers, and also if you guys actually watched that series, he was very productive 5 out of 6 of those games. Very productive. He had three games. He had over 30 points. He had a game, even though he scored 18 points in, he had 10 rebounds to go along with it. So he's even, showing himself on the glass. And that was the game I think Donovan Mitchell had 30 something, 36. So they pretty much won that game and Utah took it over. But in a nutshell, PG did his job as far as those first 5 games. Now, of course, the 6th game pretty much was a game that he actually had a bad showing. He had played 45 minutes, had 5 points, right? 8 assists, pretty much was used as a guy who was, in the corner as a spot-up shooter. Had 6 turnovers and 3 rebounds. Now, you guys asked why was he used as basically a guy on the corner? Well, it was documented by PG in his podcast that he was dealing with a leg injury, right? So this is something that he kind of lightly touched on. He said, and even before that, George even dealt with injuries against the Utah Jazz in 2018. This is the quote that PG said. He said, "The year in Oklahoma, and people try to ridicule me like, oh, he didn't play well. I had a partially torn meniscus. I was getting that shot with that shit, get him shot to play with that shit." George detailed that he felt great heading into the series as the medicine he was taking kicked in. But as the series went on, the medicine started to wear off, and it became difficult for him to move forward, to move at 100%. Now, that's what I'll pay attention to, that last sentence. He felt good going into the series, but as the medicine wore off, he started feeling like he couldn't really, move at 100%. Right? So basically, you're dealing with antibiotics, you're dealing with, steroids. It's kind of like, you drink like a, Coke, or you drink some type of energy drink. You start off fine for like the first few hours, but then when you crash, you crash, and you burn, right? You got that high, you got that, energy going, but once the energy drink wears off, and once, the spike wears off, then, you start actually feeling natural again. And that's when, you start feeling, not feeling like you're superhuman. And that's what PG was going through in that series against the Utah Jazz. I mean, if you look at this, the statistic just in, general, you guys can, definitely see that, PG at the time, I'm gonna put this up here so y'all can see, he played very well throughout the entire series up until that game 6, which he was basically, like I said, used as a spot up shooter. He was used as a guy that just stand in the corner. Now, the narrative became that PG could not perform. And as y'all can see by what he said and by also the numbers, is that he had something else going on besides just he wasn't in the game. Like, he basically was the best player on the court, 3 out of those 6 games. Right? At least 3 out of 6 games he was the best player on the court. Right? But for whatever the situation is, people want to, go off on PG basically being out a playoff performer, but all because of, what the media has pretty much put in people's head. A lot of it has to do with that bubble where, Paul George kind of, had a bad showing. But the problem is, again, that people don't put it into context. Again, there was plenty of games that PG played very, very well, even in this Denver series. He had a couple games where he shot the ball bad, i.e. game 4 and i.e. of course game 7. He had 10 points in both games. But even that series, he also had a bunch of 22, 23, 32, 33 points, 26 points. He had a bunch of games where he had, like, very, very high efficiency stats, and also playing well on both ends of the ball. But that pretty much does not get talked about. All you just really hear about is the game 7 when he hits the side of the backboard. Right? So once again, people, when we talk about these players, quote unquote, choking, or players that, don't show up, let's remember to put this stuff into context, man. Let's remember to put this stuff into context. Right? So when I see what I saw in 2020 and I see in 2021, PG's turned a different page, and he actually, performed at the highest level. It means that, to me personally, it meant like there was some truth to him not being completely locked in that bubble. That bubble affected his mindset in that sense, because literally the next year he was, pretty much balling at all aspects of the game. 2 games away from taking the team to the NBA Finals. You know what I mean? So that needs to be talked about as much as people want to bring up his, quote unquote, few playoff, disasters. Right? But like I said, when it comes to choking, I think that gets thrown around a little bit too much and a little too easy. And we just give that label to anybody who has a bad moment. I think PG has been subjugated to a lot of media driven narratives that has not really held any weight. Instead of people actually going and actually finding out and, thinking for themselves, they rather believe the big story. Because my thing with an opinion is, you can have an opinion, but it can only be so strong when you don't have no type of, evidence or fact against it, right? All other than that, you're just pretty much just chatting. And that's what it's been with PG. I think a lot of people just be chatting and saying they can't trust this, they can't trust that, but really can't break down of why they can't trust him. Oh, it's because he had a bad shooting game in game 6 in Utah, or he, just doesn't feel like he's serious, or he's not looking mean enough on the court. Like, a lot of stuff that people have put on PG where, it's like kind of hard to listen to them at times. But it's that's kind of what it is with Paul George about his, if you can kind of trust him in the postseason. But I want to go to the next person as y'all come in here and smash that like button. I want to go to James Harden. Now, James Harden, may be the person looked at as the poster boy choking, according to the masses. We saw 2022, we saw 2016, we saw 2014, we saw 2012, we saw all these moments where he quote unquote did not show up in the big stage. That's what we've seen. With saying that, I think again we have to put things into context. We got to actually put things into full display about how the points that we're trying to make. We got to actually go into deep detail about it. So again, if we bring up the numbers and the statistics and what James Harden has done in the postseason, his record in the postseason is 85 and 75. That's his playoff record. Better than PG, who's at 51 and 57. Harden is 85 and 79. That's better than Chris Paul. That's better than Jimmy Butler. That's better than who else? DeMar DeRozan. Russell Westbrook is better than him. Let's see. Yeah, that's kind of the main guys, but Harden's another one. I think he gets a little bit underappreciated by the fan base, and I finally figured out why. Harden is a player who's known for the regular season, and everybody knows that. Everybody says, regular season James Harden is probably one of the top, players of all time. So I think at that point, when you look at James Harden's career in a nutshell, people are loosely seeing 36, 37 points in a game. And when they get a player who decides not to play or, personally, kind of folds, they start to lose trust in him. Now, I'm not saying that Harden is somebody that has not had choking moments. I think we need to discover the actual difference between being a choker and choking. And I think it needs to be said when a person gets to a certain level and actually gets to, multiple finals or multiple NBA finals or multiple conference finals, that needs to be highlighted, right? At the end of the day, James Harden's been to 4 conference finals. He's been to 1 NBA finals. And at the end of the day, some of the same guys that people want to put on a pedestal and put so high, James Harden has beat them as far as, playoff records. Also, if you look at, his career, his choking, I got to actually ask, what does that really mean? From a statistical standpoint, there's been playoff series where James Harden, like I said, has been extraordinary. He's been great as far as a, scoring aspect of the game, right? I mean, after the third season, he was giving you 26.3, 26.8, 27.2, 26.6, 28.5, 28.6, 31.6, 29.6, 20.2 in Brooklyn, where he was looked at as the facilitator. 18.6 his first year in Philadelphia, coming off that hamstring injury, and then 20.3, which was last year against the Celtics. When I hear them numbers, I hear them scoring averages. I see the assist averages, year by year as well, as a second option in Philly and Brooklyn. From a statistical standpoint, he played like an all-star. He played like a guy who, got his pretty much his numbers, while giving you guys, 37, 38, all these minutes, and then, making deep runs in the postseason as well. I mean, for a person to be called a choker, I would like to see a person who actually did more than that, around his age, or how many players are, consistently, basically taking their team to the playoffs every single year, not missing the playoffs at all, and also giving you those type of scoring averages. That's just not happening. So where does the choking come in when it comes to James Harden? Well, like PG, Harden has been subjugated to what they call final game syndrome, meaning Harden, if you looked at his career, he'll play great during the series. He'll play great his first few games. He'll play great, you know what I'm saying, up until like the final closeout game. And then more times than not, he will have a bad showing. The 2022 playoffs against the Sixers in game 6, I think he had 12 points. The San Antonio Spurs in 2016, he had 10 points without Kawhi Leonard being there. Last year against the Boston Celtics, I think he had 14 points. Even though he had 40 point per game performances, he gave you 14 points. Right? Oh, I'm sorry, he gave you 9 points. Oh, Embiid had 14 points. So those are the numbers you can see from Harden. 45 points in game 1, 42 in game 2. The games he had multiple high assists. As a second option, there was games he did his job, and there was games he did not come up to play. That's why I said, and I tell people all the time when they keep trying to yell out second option, James Harden, he's not a second option no more. He's a third option. Because we've seen that already with Philadelphia, and we see how far that went. He's no longer a second option. He's a third option at this point of his career. It's Kawhi and PG are the top two dogs just right now. But in a nutshell, James Harden is a player that has had some great playoff performances. He's put out a lot of teams, right? He put out the Houston Rockets with, he put out the, Clippers when they had Chris Paul. He put out Russell Westbrook against OKC. He put out Dame Lillard in the Portland Trailblazers. He's put out Donovan Mitchell in the Utah Jazz. He's put out, the Boston Celtics with Jaylen Brown, with Jason Tatum when he was with Brooklyn. He put out, a lot of top teams. The only teams he was getting beat for in Houston pretty much were the Warriors and then the Spurs that 1 year in 2016. Other than that, he wasn't getting put out in the playoffs. He got put out in the playoffs by the Lakers in 2020 in the bubble, who turned out to be the champions. But the years that James Harden was really getting quote unquote eliminated or getting bounced was against all-time historic teams. The Warriors, which is a dynasty, the Spurs, which is a historic team, and the Lakers, who were a dominant team in that bubble, were the champions. That's who James Harden is losing to. So when you look at the statistics, you look at the moments, you look at the teams he played against and beat, and plays the teams that he lost to. I just have to be clear with a lot of people when they talk about his playoff choking or his playoff disappointments. Now, I want to go into something a little bit different. Like, what is this whole choking thing? Like, what does it mean to be a choker? Does that mean that if you don't win a championship, that means you're a habitual choker? Does that mean if you don't make the finals, you're a choker? If that means, you have one bad game out of 6 or 7, does that make you a choker? I just got to be clear what this choking meaning actually means. Because how I look at it when it comes to choking is you reach the highest stage or you reach a level of pressure that you can't conceive at the moment, and you end up, dropping the mantle. That's why I look at it as being a choker. And when you look at PG and James Harden, you can look at 1 or 2 instances from both guys where you can call that being a choker. And if that's the case, how is it that people are so concerned about Harden? Like, shout out to my boy Mass for, the video earlier, Time Out with Mr. Mass. If you guys have not got a chance to check out his channel, make sure you check out my man Time Out with Mr. Moss. He's a Houston Rockets fan. He lives in Sacramento, does a lot of great work. He, has, also a lot of, great meals on his show. He talks basketball and hoops. They had a show earlier today where they spoke about, a few of the teams, and the Clippers was one of them, as one of the teams that's, looked to be a championship contender. One of the things that people have concerns about, like I said, is with Paul George and James Harden. And there was a gentleman, I can't remember his name, but he came on the panel and he spoke about how he thinks that, the Clippers having chokers on their team is a concern. Well, if you want to call the chokers of Paul George and James Harden, you gotta look at the other teams in the NBA and also in the conference to actually, make that claim. You know, even with the Minnesota Timberwolves, who I think, have a lot of good upside, that people seem to somehow feel like they're ready for the moment, even though Karl Anthony Towns has had many years in the playoffs where he's basically just flummoxed, right? Mike Conley never got past the second round in his career. A very good point guard, but never was the cream de la creme. You have, Chris Finch, who's never really had no success in the playoffs with the Minnesota Timberwolves. Um, and then, of course, Ant-Man, who's hungry to have a historic playoff run, but he still hasn't had one. He hasn't gotten past the first round yet. So there's just so many things that we can look at with the Timberwolves and say, well, they either have had chokers, i.e., Karl Anthony Towns and Mike Conley, or they are just a little bit too underage and young to, really have this amount of success. But they get somehow looked at as a team that can be so good in the playoffs. But us, we got guys on the team who have accomplished more, who's made deep playoff runs, who's actually been in every instance in the playoffs, damn near, that they're going to somehow they're going to end up choking against teams who really can't really, they can't even really grasp what they're about to get into in about a couple months. See, all these guys on the screen that y'all see, PG, Harden, Westbrook, Kawhi, all these dudes have already been in the position a lot of these teams haven't been in. Minnesota, OKC, Toronto, the Pelicans, the Mavericks, the Kings. You know what I'm saying? Most of these teams that, are in the top ranked positions during the season, the Clippers have already been there. The Suns have been there. The Lakers have already been there. The Nuggets have been there. So it's a difference when you talk about regular season than actual playoffs. Just a fact. But I just want to get back to the point. From a strategic way of looking at it, I think we got to speak about a couple things. First of all, with PG and Harden, in years past, they've had to deal with having to deal with the best defenders guarding them in the playoffs in the postseason. The number one defenders guarding James Harden, number one defenders guarding Paul George. That's what they have to basically deal with the majority of their careers. Hell, even Russell Westbrook, who's coming off the bench, who looks, amazing, had to deal with a lot of times the number one defender. Now that you get a team who has nothing but, great offensive talent and also, very, very good defense, this is no longer the same team and the same burdens that, these players have to carry. And that has to be highlighted. I think people got to stop looking at this as, oh, well, this is just Paul George and James Harden. They're going to end up choking. Like I just put it on the screen, they don't have careers of just simply just choking in the playoffs. They have had more better games than not, and they've also had to play a deep playoff runs to show that they've actually, are able to somewhat carry the team as a number one option. Now that you got PG and Harden as number 2 and 3 option, and so many other weapons on the team, who's going to really put them in a position where they're going to end up choking, turn the ball over, missing shots? Who's going to do that? There's no one to really even make that job. If you look throughout the entire West down the list, I mean, you maybe can say the Lakers, who have a lot of, defenders, have a lot of length, but, their guard play is whack. Their guard play is very, very mediocre. So somewhere there's going to be a mismatch when you talk about, us facing them. But Harden and PG are two guys who, I don't think would get rattled by being guarded by, the second or third defender. That's just personally me. I think there'll be two guys that'll be actually licking their chops, looking forward to actually, displaying their talent. But when you talk about can they be trusted, I firmly believe yes. I thought they could be trusted before this. I didn't need to see them going through this amount of the season to kind of see what they are, as ball players. They want to win, right? So, excuse me. We have to look at it kind of as a situation where most of these guys, or both of these guys, Harden and PG, they're hearing the whispers. They're hearing, a lot of people, look at them as possibly, what I'm saying, could, choke the series or whatever, which I say again, this is all media talk and narrative points. These are all media talk and narrative points. This doesn't even come to the game. This comes to just basically speaking, trying to, what I'm saying, create a narrative. So, excuse me. Um, yeah, this is the type of era we in with the media. So I think it just comes to a point like when you hear a person say they don't trust PG and James Harden, you have to ask them why. And if they give you something like, "Oh, well, this is what I've seen for years, years and years," you have to kindly, interrupt and say, "This isn't the same. This ain't the first of all, this ain't the same player, and this ain't the same team." All right. It comes off as a little bit of kind of Clipper hate in a way from certain people, but I think some people also just are a little bit um over paranoid about the past. There you go. So let me see what y'all guys say in the comments. If you guys trust the Clippers or you trust PG and James Harden, please let me know in the comment section. If not, please tell me why. Tell me an instant that where you feel like that's gonna stick with you, and yeah, just send it right over. But we'll be back on again after the OKC game on Thursday. So respectfully say, pull up a seat, pull up a chair, pull up, peace out of here like swimwear.